Joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Giorgio Cafiero. He's the CEO of Gulf State Analytics and an adjunct assistant professor at Georgetown University. Welcome to the program. Always good to speak to you. So firstly, let's start with Trump's really quick stop in Qatar ahead of his visit to the ASEAN region. What do you make of that meeting and why he decided to make that stop?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on the program. Always an honor to be your guest. I think that this brief stop in Qatar on his way to Malaysia spoke to the extent to which Trump and those around him in his administration see Qatar as a very close U.S. ally and one that is playing an incredibly important role with the very fragile ceasefire in Gaza. Right now, the Trump administration is trying to consolidate this very fragile truce and move from phase one into phase two. There's no doubting the fact that as the administration continues with these efforts, it's going to see Doha as a really key diplomatic player that needs to continue playing a very, very important role in the process.
And that certainly is a role that Doha itself has said that they want to keep playing. But since this ceasefire came into effect earlier this month, we've actually seen several U.S. leaders traveling to Israel. And Israeli media has described this as babysitting. Do you think that's what it is, keeping Netanyahu in check and keeping this, albeit fragile, ceasefire in place?
I definitely think the Trump administration does not want to see the ceasefire collapse. And they understand that preventing it from collapsing will require a continuation of pressure on Netanyahu's government in Israel. And definitely, as we have seen from some of the recent remarks from Vice President Vance, the administration sees a connection between this truce in Gaza and the situation in the West Bank, understanding that Israel moving ahead with plans for some sort of annexation of the West Bank could easily throw off the ceasefire in Gaza. So the administration definitely is sending out a message that the U.S. is not going to tolerate an annexation of the West Bank, at least certainly not right now. And I think that definitely this is a huge focus of the Trump administration, seeing to it that the full-scale genocidal war on Gaza does not resume. That being said, it's going to take a lot of pressure that gets sustained for the long term, and there's going to have to be much diplomatic energy put into efforts to get from phase one into phase two. If the Trump team is going to be successful in really keeping its eye on the ball, keeping the pressure on Israel, that remains to be seen. But I think right now, all signs indicate that the administration is very focused on moving ahead with the ceasefire. Trump's rhetoric, as we saw from what he said while meeting with the Qatari emir and prime minister, he seems to be very optimistic about the truce. I think the analysts who are looking at the actual situation on the ground are probably not nearly as optimistic as he is. But, Trump is committed to presenting himself as a successful deal maker, a successful peacemaker, and Gaza seems to be what he wants to have as one of his wins during the first year of his second term.
And Giorgio, one of the things that he has spoken about as part of this diplomatic effort is an international stabilization force in Gaza. When he was speaking to reporters on Air Force One, he said it's something that could be in place pretty quickly. Just talk us through those statements, because it's quite something to have to put together such a team and possibly then even get them on the ground in Gaza.
Well, it's not necessarily going to be very easy. First of all, the Israeli leadership has its own opinions about which countries should or should not be involved in this so-called stabilization force on the ground in Gaza. And we have seen Israel put out statements expressing its opposition to Turkey playing such a role. But I think obviously Turkey, such an important country, not only in the Middle East, but throughout the wider Islamic world, has a really important role to play in Gaza. Whether or not Israel is going to eventually see it that way is another question. But with so many other countries around the world, we need to keep in mind that their domestic laws will only permit them to deploy peacekeeping forces or administrators in the event that there is a UN Security Council resolution in place. So that's going to require quite a bit of work on the part of the US and other countries to really get this through the United Nations. It could take some time, but I do think that there is a desire on the part of many countries to make a contribution, but we'll see which countries these end up being and how quickly everything can move forward. Definitely a couple of unknown variables in the equation here.
Yeah, definitely. Giorgio Cafiero, as always, thank you so much for your analysis. Appreciate it.